Hello friends, in this episode we're going to answer the questions of why in the world do we have a shipping container here on our property, and then also what uses might you have for one. They have their pros and cons for storage or any number of other things, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But we'll just begin with kind of the backstory of what I've been using this thing for to date, and if you stick around to the end, Renee's going to tell you what she plans to use it for next.
All right, so yes, I'm excited to be able to have my hands on the shipping container, and I know some of you have seen some really creative uses for it. And one of the things that I really appreciated was how David utilized this. I know one of the first things when we first met, I was like, wow, that's so creative. So I don't know if you can give a little bit of the backstory of how you came upon the shipping container and kind of some of the evolution of it.
Yeah, definitely. So the backstory is I bought this thing around 2009 and I used it to move in. But from the very beginning, I had designs on using this for my wood shop. And so this became my woodworking shop. So my woodworking hobby has evolved from having, well, no dedicated space at all to then a portion of my garage dedicated to it, to then after I moved back in 2009, this became a dedicated space, which was wonderful because of course it gets sawdust out of the garage and all of the vehicles and all of the camping gear and everything else. It contains the mess, and it's great because for the other reasons of I could still park a car in my garage, whereas I was kind of hesitant to, well, I've got a project going and I'd rather not have to tear it down and kind of put everything away practically so that I could get a car back in the garage. So it was just a wonderful luxury to have this thing. So I looked and looked and looked for the right house that checked all the other practical boxes, but I was keeping an eye out for the layout of the property such that there was a space where this thing could sit alongside my house back then. This is well before we met.
Right.
Where this thing could sit permanently. So once I found that place and got it dropped in there, got all of my stuff out of it, we went about the process of upcycling it effectively. So on the interior, it had a fair amount of surface rust on the walls, so we knocked back the surface rust and then painted it with a gloss white equipment enamel, which was perfect. It bounces light around in there like crazy. The flooring was pretty beat up. I don't know how many trips across the ocean or what have you that this thing has taken, and stuff being loaded into it and loaded out of it however many hundreds of times. So rather than try to repair the floor that was there, I just kind of added another layer over the top of it. I started out putting down plastic thinking, this might serve as a wee bit of a vapor barrier. I don't know how much good that did or not. But then what I added on top of that was just some tongue and groove plywood, and then I used this heavy deck and porch paint on it to just kind of ruggedize a little bit. So had to cut it to size just a little bit because the interior dimensions of a container are just a little bit under 8 feet. So your standard 4x8 sheet of plywood was just, it was better than having it not big enough and then having the opposite problem. So it worked out really well. So I kind of thought that the way that we did electrical in there was pretty clever. I wanted a lot of outlets in there, of course, for tools, because my primary initial purpose of it was going to be for a wood shop. Now, mounting those metal outlet boxes was a pain in the butt because we actually have them bolted directly through the steel walls of the container, and that means I had to drill holes through the steel for each one of those, and the steel is pretty thick and pretty tough. So with just a regular mere mortal household consumer type drill and drill bits, boring one single hole just was like bzzz, taking forever. So anyway, that took a long time to even just prep for mounting the electrical boxes before we could even start stringing wires and doing all that sort of stuff. But I took a little bit different approach for the lighting and how to mount it. Of course, there was still a whole lot of holes to drill, but what I did was mount a series of 2x6s, kind of created a soffit around 3 sides of the container, and then on that 2x6 material, I was then able to mount the lighting and then also having wood to screw into made it quick and easy to hang or mount or organize other things up there as well. Now, for how to get power to the container as a whole from the house, we did it kind of like an RV, in that there's this just big, fat, heavy gauge cable with a chunky 240 volt RV type of a plug. And then on the outside of the house, we just mounted an RV type of an outlet. So like a giant toaster or something, you drag the cable over there and you plug into the house, and I've got power and lights and everything I needed. So, you know, once we got moved in, of course, the layout evolved a little bit, but not much, because there aren't many options for how you can lay things out in there, because it's small.
Right.
We called it the one butt shop. But I actually have a few photos here of me, my dad, and my son all out there in the same time, at the same time working on
Super
something.
sweet.
So yeah, multi-generational shot there. Treasured photos, so I'm sharing them with you. It was kind of cool. So yeah, the as far as the cost of the container, back when I got this one, this is a 20-footer that you see behind me. It was around $3,000. And I think if you wanted a 40-foot container, I kind of keep an eye on prices of them. I think currently you can get, at least in this part of the country, they can be had for around $4,500. So twice the space for not that much more money. Now maybe that sounds like a big number, but if you needed perchance some sort of exterior structure at your house, and you start looking into build costs for other types of sheds or structures, at the end of the day, this comes out pretty cheap.
Right.
And yeah, a little bit, well, okay, maybe a lot, utilitarian looking and not great. So to that end, the big chunky doors that are on the front of these things, the big steel doors, they're great for securing. And I'm gonna let the noisy pickup go by, because we're doing this live, and this is real life, and this is where we live, and there's a road right over there. Anyway, so those big chunky doors on the outside, yes, very weather tight, very secure as far as locking the thing down, but yeah, not very residential looking in the western suburbs of Portland. So I did choose to rip those big steel doors off.
With your bare hands?
With my bare hand. No, I had help.
Okay.
And then I just framed in the opening with 2x4s so that I could add household type doors. And then I went with double doors so that I could get large projects in and out of the shop, but then also I was a lot easier to deal with, like large footprint tools like a table saw or workbenches or whatever else. Had plenty of room to be able to get those things in and out. So that was the side that faced the street of where I lived at the time in west of Portland. So yeah, it made it a little bit more residential looking, at least from the street. But then fast forward to when I met this young lady, 6 years later-ish. We knew pretty early on that we had plans for building a house, and we found this property, and we had the plot plan worked out for where the house was going to be and where the pole building was going to be, and we actually knew where this was going to be.
Right.
And so this, before we had even broken ground on the house, this was the first thing to arrive on this chunk of land.
Right.
So we knew exactly where we wanted it. But this thing showed up a couple months, I think, before they even started digging out for the foundation. Now, if you've been following the channel, you've been on this journey with us of building out our pole building here at the other side of the property. And within that is my new wood shop space. So that means the purpose that this has been serving is no longer needed. And so as I've been trickling things out, you've been trickling things in.
Sure have.
And so we found the right pocket. Officially,
Oh boy.
I am handing it over.
Yay.
And so the next purpose that this thing gets to serve, Renee's going to tell you more about that.
Yeah, sure. So, and I've hinted at this a little bit too in some of my garden videos, that this is going to become my potting shed. So yes, I've been trickling things in, it's just been kind of a dumping ground because I too have been using the garage. I've always just had the garage. I haven't had a garden, so a lot of my stuff has just been piling up in the garage. So I've been moving that out, and I'm excited to be able to have a place to store things because, yeah, I have a lot of stuff too. But having it all in a well-organized space is going to be something I'm excited about, and I'm going to invite you to come along with me as I organize that. And I'd love to hear your ideas for, garden shed, tool shed, organization, because right now I've got piles of little plastic pots everywhere.
We have piles. That's okay.
So the
We'll get
pile,
there.
yeah. So anyway, so that's the inside. Looking forward to that. And also I want to cutify the outside. It's a little rough and ready. And so I don't know if I'm going to paint it, if I'm going to put a barn quilt.
You don't like a rail car gray?
Well,
It almost matches the house.
our house is gray, right? So I feel like it needs a little bit of zhuzhing. So whether I paint it or I just put some, do some landscaping, some lilacs or rhododendrons or something
needs a
like
little
that.
help.
It
You're
needs a
right.
little help. So I want to cutify it. And then my garden, my future forever garden, will be on the other side. So it'll be super convenient to have the potting shed here with the garden over there. It may entail a greenhouse on that side as well. So lots of ideas.
The ultimate Uber
But now
someday.
it's mine.
Yes.
But I'm really grateful for it. I mean, there's a lot I think we could do. It's set up for power. We don't have power to it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I'm going to do any kind of grow systems in it and all of that. We will see. So
We will see.
Share your ideas with me, what you've done in your potting sheds, grow spaces. I need some suggestions.
So with that, there's the forward looking for this container. We've done a little bit of a history lesson with the rearward looking stuff. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it gave you some ideas about maybe how you could incorporate something like this for needs that are at your place. Again, we're on a bunch of land here, but I had this in a pretty suburban residential situation too. It was mostly obscured by a fence. Didn't have any neighbors complain, so it's worked out well for a bunch of different scenarios. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for joining us here at He Said, She Shed, and we'll see you again soon.
Take care.